I'm Jennifer Bochsler, and I started TechWise Littles as an online resource for parents in the midst of this pandemic. I've been working in education with adolescents and families for over 2 years, or 20 years, 2 decades, watching their teens' slow absorption into the digital world. But when I became a parent 4 years ago, my world was rocked as I watched my 3-month-old little baby girl, her eyes lock on the TV and be mesmerized. And then by 6 months, she was clamoring for this bright, shiny object of my phone. And I realized I had been having all these conversations with teenagers and their families for decades. The conversation was actually starting too late, in my opinion. Tech is no longer a teenage conversation. It's a conversation for babies, right? And around that time, I stumbled upon this amazing quote by Desmond Tutu that says, there comes a point where we have to stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and see why they're falling in. And here I've been pulling teens out of the river for years, and I was watching my newborn fall in. And I just became obsessed with early tech research and trying to give parents actionable items to raise these little digital natives. Mostly I needed a guide myself, right?
Yeah. I'm curious, just stick on the research for just a second. This feels like a very new phenomenon. And is the body of work around this, the studies around this, is it real spotty, or do you think that there's a big old magnifying glass on this problem?
So early tech research focused a lot on teenagers, and within the last few years, there's been an explosion of research that's just budding, talking about family media use and then toddler and infant media use, simply because we're in that world, right? And the iPhone is
Changed everything.
15 years old, right? The iPad's only 12 years old. We're raising children in this social experiment. And I'm now seeing the first generation of kids and babies that were raised on iPads and iPhones come into my office as teenagers. And just anecdotally, there's a lot more attention problems. There's a lot more emotional regulation problems. And, I'm a mom of 2 now. I have a 4-month-old and a near 4-year-old. And I think there's so much preventative work families can do that are not that hard to create healthy tech boundaries in your family.
Well, we know we've talked about early childhood education on the show, and we know that that's important. Some may argue what the year is, but they're baked by the time they're 7. So I'm thinking that each one of those years up to 3-4 years old are so critical. Why does this matter so much as it relates to tech?
Well, there's never a more opportune time than these first few years of life. Many of us have heard this, but before age 2, the child's brain makes over 1 million neuron connections every single second. I mean, that's mind-blowing. By age 3, the child's brain is tripling in size. By 5, 90% of a child's brain growth has already happened. So this is an amazingly opportune window, right? There's no other time in life where your brain or your child's brain is connecting at this speed, learning at this speed. We now know the brain can change throughout the entire life, but these early years are a beautiful window, not only for growth and development, but children have this amazing gift of presence, right? They're born mindful. They're born fascinated with like a bug or a blade of grass. They're fully embodied. They live in the now. And there are teachers to that. They're enchanted by life. I mean, I'm an adult. I struggle with presence. I'm distracted. And then I look in my newborn's eyes and, time stops. And that brings me back to real life and real joy. And that's what we all need to fight for here, right?
Is tech distracting us from that? I mean, I think I know the answer to that, but devil's advocate for just a second. The computer gives us access to more information, more books, more children's stories, more bugs. There's lots of things that we can put in front of kids that the screen can bring us. Is that bad, or is it the amount of time we're spending, or is there something else that's not happening because of all the screen time? I'm sorry, there were 3 questions in there.
Great question. I'll try to answer all of them. First
Okay.
of all, tech is definitely a disruptor of presence, both for ourselves and our kids. The average US adult is checking their phone every 4 minutes. Studies show just the presence of a phone on the table leads to less connected conversation at the dinner table, less conversation. Children are free playing less if the parents have their mobile phone out. So we do know presence is disrupted. A. B, tech is neither good or bad. I just want to lay that on the table. Like, we are on tech right now. Tech got us through the pandemic. Facetime saved my life because my family lived 3,000 miles away. So this is not a black or white issue. We just need to name that tech is mesmerizing. And we also need to name that some of the best and brightest minds in the whole world are building this digital universe, and they're building it in ways that they want to keep us on it longer. And that's in contrast to kids who are fascinated by the slow pace of life, the natural pace of nature, right? And when kids are, growing up in this fast-paced, hyper-colored digital world, and then you as a parent can't be that fully produced show all the time, guess what? That makes your parenting life harder, because they want you to be that show full of bells and whistles, and no one can be an entertainment circus all day long, right? It makes their teachers less interesting, which makes personally my job harder, because no teacher can be a fully produced show. It makes your kid's educational journey that much harder. And so it's not good or bad. It's a swap. And so we just need to be mindful, like, what are we swapping when we're handing kids tech this early on in their journey?
So good. There's a lot there to chew on. Give me an example, because for instance, with FaceTime and staying in touch with family, like that's a big deal. Thank gosh we have that, right? I feel very connected to my 3 grandkids as a result of that. But I know my daughter has her camera in his face every day, taking pictures and sharing his whole life out there. Where's the balance for us as parents or grandparents even?
Sure. So, well, the AAP and the CDC actually have put things like FaceTime in a clause saying, like, that is a safe form of screen time for littles, because they're connecting in real time, normally with an adult, with someone they love. And the real-time interaction where they make a sound or they tell a joke, or they eat a grape, and grandma and grandpa does on their end as well, that's building connection, that's building language. That is what AAP and CDC
What's
does.
AAP?
The American Academy of Pediatrics.
Got it. Thanks.
But outside of FaceTime, it's not recommended for kids under age 2 to have any screen time. And that includes phones, that includes, computers, iPads. And then from age 2 to 5, the recommended time limits are, maximum 1 hour a day of high quality content in the presence of adult. And everyone wants to know about screen time minutes. It's our most asked question, right? Because just give me the number and I can follow the number. And I wish it was that simple, but that's actually not the most important factor when it comes to the screen time story. There's much richer questions we need to be asking ourselves. Who your child is watching with. Why are they watching? Are we handing kids tech to calm them down rather than learning emotional regulation? And when are they watching? Are they watching right before bed, which is a sleep disruptor? So there's different nuances of screens. So screen time minutes is actually, in my opinion, one of the least helpful guidelines.
So one of the things as parents is, whether we are aware of it or not, and this, is that our especially the littles, I love that word, by the way, the littles are modeling our behavior, right? So how we react, how they don't have any other, model. So we're it. And if we are forever like this, oh yeah, just a second, like this is, whether they get to see the screen or not, they know that mommy or daddy has one of these things and they spend a lot of time with it. Do you And I get it. It's very hard to not have that phone right there. We're all tethered. And that's not, doesn't appear to be generational, because my in-laws are more tethered than I am, I swear. Does that factor into what you're thinking here in terms of, do you try to maybe keep that just, I don't know the answer. I don't even know the right question here, but it's about modeling that behavior of always being on it.
Yeah, so it's about modeling, because our kids want to be like us, right?
Yeah.
So we are modeling how we want them to be in the world. So it's really hard for us to be glued to our phones and then make phones taboo for our kids. That just doesn't make sense as a
There
parent.
you go. That's the question. Yeah.
As well as, the research is muddy in the sense of it's not clear if it's tech that, is what's the disruptor, what's, the harmful thing, or if it's what tech is swapping out. So there's only so many hours in a day.
Right.
And so, kids are encouraged to be outside for 2 to 3 hours a day. And now the average toddler is on tech 2.5 hours a day. And so that's a swap. So right now, 1 in 4 kids are not meeting developmental milestones by the time they enter school, either in language or fine and gross motor skills or socio-emotional development. And it's not necessarily that they're just on tech and tech is hyper-colored and fast-paced. It's also, they're not getting the time to develop some of those crucial play-based activities that only play can foster in those first 5 years. Things like, imagination, creativity, building forts, time outside, problem solving, boredom. That's the seed of all innovation and creativity. Let your kids be bored. And, if we want a generation in 20 years that can be innovators and creators and disruptors, we need to give our kids unstructured time in this opportune window of brain development to do that. Because once the school train starts, life speeds up. So this is the window to do that.
So I know you have some, in terms of these choices, you call them tech swaps. Do you have a few of those you can leave for the audience?
Sure. I'll give you just a few. I mentioned this one earlier. I really encourage you just to drop the guilt and stop counting screen time minutes and just swap our focus as parents. Instead of focusing on oh, was that an hour? Was that 50 minutes? Was that 70 minutes today? Let's focus instead on what our children are doing when they're not on tech. And let's really ramp that up and get intentional about it. Okay. So are they getting ample time in nature, ample free play, ample time to be bored, all those things I just mentioned. Letting ourselves get intentional about that, those real world activities and adventures.
That's one.
Number 2, let's get intentional about the nuances of screens I spoke about and when we do use screens. The point of this talk is not to be screen free. Tech is not going away, but we have to get conscious about it and use tech intentionally so it doesn't use us and use our kids. So that means when we're going to give our kids screens, are we going to be there with them? How are we going to make that experience better? The presence of an adult is a protective factor for the children under age 5. Can we swap TV out right before bed? Can we swap a fast-paced show for a slower-paced show? Think of those kind of swaps when you actually do use screens.
Okay.
Number 3, we like to call this the intentional 15. Parenting is not about quantity. We're on all the time, but can we really solidify quality, unplugged 15 minutes a day where our phone is in the other room and we are with our children, following their lead, making eye contact, and just being present with them and giving them that attention and love. It is a meditation for us and it is a meditation for them. It's so good for the family. And then number 4, lastly, this is huge. If at all possible, swap solo tech time for kids under 5, particularly under 3, for joint tech time. Research is really clear on this. It's called co-viewing or joint media engagement. And us as parents, we act like an SPF against the negative effects of screens for our kids, right? Our presence mitigates some of those detrimental effects, those language or cognitive or social emotional delays, because we're there with them. Tech is emotional. So we need to be there to make eye contact with our kids when they're experiencing tech, or if they're scared or processing what's going on. So I encourage you to make a little vow called We Before Three, that before the age of 3, just be there with your kids when they're on tech. You can be folding laundry, but just be there on the couch with them. To really, it'll make a world of difference in their development.
Jennifer, I'm so glad I said yes to inviting you on the show. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here. I'm excited to move forward in this.